Hi everyone, welcome and thanks for joining us today for the next installment of the MnDOT GIS webinar series. This month we have Malcolm Wade presenting LRS using Esri's Roads and Highways and Roadway Characteristics Editor. Malcolm is a research analyst intermediate in the Office of Transportation System Management, or OTSM, in the Transportation Data Analysis, or TDA section. He has worked for MnDOT for over 6 years doing LRS and GIS work. Malcolm spent his first 2 years at MnDOT editing the old Transportation Information System, or TIS, mainframe, and has since transitioned to working on the new Linear Referencing System, or LRS. Due to his experience with both systems, Malcolm will provide insight about key differences between the LRS and the TIS mainframe. Today, he will primarily discuss editing and maintaining the LRS as well as demonstrate editing. He will be able to touch upon the difficulties and new challenges the LRS poses. Over the next hour, Malcolm will give you an overview of LRS, and then he will demonstrate roads and highways, and follow that by a demonstration of the Roadway Characteristics Editor, and then we'll use the last little bit of our time to look at different resources, links, and answer any questions you may have. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Malcolm, who will present for the next hour.
Well, thanks, Lindsay, for the introduction, and thank you to everyone for tuning into the webinar. Today's webinar will be a two-parter. The first part will be a discussion of the LRS. This will include a brief overview of the LRS and touch upon a few differences between it and the old TIS mainframe. Editing, or LRS editing software, Esri extension, Roads and Highways, as well as Esri's web-based Roadway Characteristic Editor will be introduced and then demoed in part 2 of the presentation. Before we dive in, here are a few acronyms that will come up throughout the presentation. LRS, which is Linear Referencing System. Roads and Highways, which is RNH. RCE, which is Roadway Characteristics Editor. And TIS, which is Transportation Information System. Okay, so the LRS has been mentioned and discussed for the past 4 to 5 years, but what exactly is it? Well, the LRS is a network of measured line features called routes to which attributes can be referenced. Unmeasured center lines are first digitized and then calibrated and given a route and object ID to become routes. Each point along the line has an X, Y, and measure value. Because the routes are measured, roadway characteristics called events can be referenced. A linear event is tabular data referenced to the underlying network of lines through measurements along the route. Put simpler, an event layer is any tabular data with measures that gets physically tied to the route geometry. There are two types of linear events: point events and line events. Imagine we have a route, say Route 1, and tabular data that we want to reference to Route 1. We see that from the start of Route 1 to Mile 3, there is bituminous pavement, and from Mile 3 to the end of the route, there is concrete pavement. We just created two line events. Say we have a couple of point events in the form of reference posts that we want to reference to Route 1. We can easily do this as well. One of the key differences between the OTIS system and the LRS is the way routes are calibrated and length is measured. The LRS uses a measurement called cartographic length instead of true miles like in TIS. Imagine we have a hilly road. With true miles, elevation changes in the road are accounted for in the length. It's as though the user is viewing the route from a side view. For cartographic length, elevation is not part of the length. It's similar to an aerial view of the route. a user cannot notice if the route has any elevation changes or not. It's as though, to better explain it, it's as though true miles is a 3D representation of the route, while cartographic length is a 2D representation. Because of this, there's a slight change to the overall mileage. That's why LRS and old frozen data should not be mixed together. Okay. Other differences between the two systems include a new route ID naming convention. For TIS, there was the TIS code, which had 10 digits, as seen below. It could be broken into 3 subunits. The first one representing the route system, the second one representing the county/city or the county/city code, and the last representing the route number. The LRS has a similar breakdown, but it's slightly different. In the LRS, we have a route ID, which has 18 characters, as shown below. This can further be broken down into 5 different subgroups. The first one, similar to the TIS code, is the route system. The second subset is the genus. This is the genus code. The genus code stands for the geographic names information system. It is set by U.S. Geological Society. So each jurisdiction has its own GIS genus code. So this is very similar to the county/city code from TIS. Once again, the third section is the route number, just like in the old TIS code. Where we start to differ really is the route suffix and the directionality. So in the LRS, we care about which direction the route is, so whether it's increasing or decreasing. Notice that the codes are similar, but they're different with the directionality. The way routes are digitized and calibrated is slightly different too. All routes, excluding one-way roads, have an increasing and decreasing side. This means that there is mileage on both increasing and decreasing directions. The mileage for both direction increases with the increasing direction. For us, that's from west to east and from south to north. On divided road segments, both routes follow the same center line. So notice how both routes start at 0 and end at 2, and the mileage increases going eastbound. When we have divided road segments, each route has its own center line. So the decreasing side and the increasing side are on separate road beds. So notice how this change causes the mileage to start to differ. The decreasing side is slightly shorter than the increasing side.
Okay, so Roads and Highways is an ASRE-based software used to make and manage network changes to the LRS. Roads and Highways allows the user to visualize the LRS. So in Roads and Highways, edits such as adding new routes, realigning routes, and route calibration are performed. Roads and Highways will be covered in more depth during the demo, but for now, we just want to focus on the Roads and Highways toolbar. So the Roads and Highways toolbar is where different edits can be performed. For instance, we can choose the network we want to edit, which is going to be cartographic links at all times. When we are making an edit, we first have to choose the center line, and if there are any red lines available, we can choose those. Create a route and extend routes. That will be covered in great depth. That would be covered in great depth during the demo of Roads and Highways. We also have retire routes where you can retire part all of a route, as well as realign routes where you change the route ownership, and or realign where you change the geometry of the route, reassign routes where you change the ownership, and reverse route where you change the direction. We want to apply updates. This is important for after we make an edit, we want to apply updates so that the event measures reflect the new line work. We also have where we can identify different measurements along the route, as well as set a date filter if we need to go back in time and check how the route was previously configured. Okay, when edits are made in roads and highways, multiple systems downstream can be affected. For example, if a user makes an edit in roads and highways, it will update the LRS network, which can affect linear events for systems such as pavement, traffic, or bridge. This is probably the most important difference between the LRS and TIS. Before the TIS mainframe and the GIS base map, the TIS mainframe and the GIS base map were separated, it didn't communicate. So if we made a change in one, let's say we drew a new line work in the base map, we would have to go into TIS and manually update that. In the LRS, events behave a certain way depending on the type of edit made in roads and highways. So there are 5 types of event responses to network edits. They are move behavior, retire behavior, stay put, snap, and honor route measures. So a little bit more in depth into each type of event behavior. The move for the move behavior, the measures of the event is preserved, but the geographic location may change. So after we do a realignment, the event may move, but the measures will stay exactly the same, even if it goes onto the realigned area. For the retire behavior, the entire event is retired when any portion containing the event is modified. So as soon as we do the realignment, the rest of the event is retired and it won't be there anymore. For the stay put behavior, events in the middle of the realignment get retired, but events downstream stay put. So notice how at the realignment section that the events are gone, but before the realignment and after the realignment, the events are still there. For the snap behavior, the location of the event is preserved by snapping the event to a concurrent route. So what this does is it preserves the geographic location of the event. So it has a similar presentation to the stay put behavior, but in this case, the geographic location is preserved. The last event behavior is to honor the route measure. This event behavior only pertains to cartographic realignment, where cartographic realignment edits where the existing center line is modified. Notice how the event holds onto its geographic start and end location after the edit is made. For the LRS, events affected by roads and highways edits can be fixed in a web-based application called RCE. The roadway characteristic editor is a web application where events are added or edited. Under the Edit tab, we can select events and view their values in the table. If we wanted to add new events, we can build them using the Edit Events section and populating out the table or the form. We'll get this will be touched more in depth throughout the demo, and so we're going to continue to our next slide, which are required events. So we have events that must be on every route due to HPMS importance. They are traffic access control, street name, public status, facility type, basic pavement, and through lanes. I want to stress that although these are the six events that are on every route, they are not the only attributes that we maintain. There are roughly 38 attributes maintained in the LRS. Okay, so this ends part one of the webinar. I will now transition to the demo of roads and highways, followed by a demo of RCE. Thank you. Okay, for the demo, we will walk through a typical editing scenario where there are new routes that need to be digitized in. After adding the routes in roads and highways, we will transition to RCE to add the required events. Okay, so here we go. So we can see from the underlying imagery that there are new routes that need to be added in. The first step to building a route is to add in the center line. But before we digitize in the center lines, we first need to determine how many center lines we must draw in. We determine this based on street name. These new routes that we're going to digitize in are municipal routes. And according to our business practices, every municipal city street has only one street name. So for example, the street down here, 125th Street North, will only be attached to whatever route it's currently on. So we don't want to have multiple street names on local roads. Okay, so to determine street names, we go to the county and or city webpage and look at the area in question and their maps. So before this demo, I looked ahead, and it turns out that 125th Street North ends at this driveway. Fondant Trail then extends downward to meet where 125th Street ends. Fox Hill Avenue then extends downward to intersect the new Fondant Trail. And then we have two new streets, one right here, and then one continuing right here. So in total, we have 5 new center lines to draw in. So to digitize the center line, we first go into the editor toolbar, and we want to go into the editing window and go to create features. Once that create features window is open, we'll scroll down to center line and we'll click on it. Okay, I'm going to now digitize in all the new center lines, so it might take a moment, so please bear with me. So when I'm digitizing in, I want to make sure that I'm snapping to the route. We don't want to have any gaps. And notice how when I drew in the center line, I drew it in from west to east. That's once again our convention for the way routes increase. So we want to make sure that we have that in place. So I'm going to try to stay as close to the center of the route as possible. And you might be wondering why I'm not using the arc tool provided by RCE. It's because of when we use that tool, it adds in too many vertex. vertices, so we have to do it by hand. So we're approaching an intersection, and at this point, we want to try to have a vertex there. It just makes it easier to it makes it easier in the long run to have something to snap to when we're putting on events on the route, and it also makes it easier to draw in the new line work. So I won't put one here because of we have two new streets, two new streets being drawn in, and so those will have those. So I'm going to make sure once again I snap to the route, and so this is what I meant by digitizing in the having that vertex there. Now I can just easily start my drawing from there and start digitizing it.
we back on? Can anybody hear me? Yay! Okay, awesome.
Okay, so for people, for everyone who didn't hear, I was saying that beforehand, just walk back through. So I was saying that in order to select the center lines, you can't use the select tool from the editor bar and select it this way. It doesn't work.
Flip geometry on that line.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to have to use the choose center lines from the roads and highways toolbar. And I was in the middle of explaining that, let's say for instance, I drew the center line in the wrong direction. If I right click on the center line, it prompts me to flip the geometry, which I will do. So now it's in the correct, it's increasing in the correct direction. So with the center line selected, I'm now going to go to the roads and highways toolbar and select the extend tool. So we have a form that opens. For every one of our edits, we want to use today's date, which if I double click into the box, auto-populates, or I can hit the drop down and navigate to it manually. Okay, so for the route ID, since there's already an existing route we're extending, I'm just going to hit the mouse button and I'm going to select the existing route. So notice how there's an increasing and decreasing side. This is what I was talking about earlier in the presentation, how now all of our routes have an increasing and decreasing route attached to it. So for our practices, we usually do the increasing side first. So I'm just going to select that and hit OK. And so this prompts us to lock the route. So route locking is kind of a quality control mechanism. So it's just to make sure that two editors aren't editing the same route at the same time, so we can avoid errors. So we're going to go yes and lock the route. Okay, notice how the box is auto-populated with the measures. The from measure is just the point, it's just the end of the route. And the to measure is the length of the center line that we selected added onto the end of the route. If we weren't sure about that, we can hit the calculator button to make sure the route is properly calibrated, which it is. Notice how we have the recalibrate route downstream. Since this is we're extending at the end of the route, we don't necessarily need to select it, but it's good to have it on because when you make edits at the beginning, it recalibrates the rest of the route downstream with the new to affect the new edit. So with that in mind, we're going to click OK, and we're going to let the edit go through. Okay, so yes, notice how I'll choose the identify tool, and if I select the area, and if I change it to cartographic link, notice how there's the increasing side is now on the new center line that was drawn in, but there's no decreasing side. So we're going to do the exact same thing for the decreasing side now. I might go through this one a little faster. We're once again going to select the center line, and we're going to go up to the extend tool. We're going to have today's date. We're going to now select the decreasing side instead of the increasing. We're going to check our measures, and we're going to hit OK.
We have a question, Malcolm.
Yeah.
Why do we hand digitize center lines versus getting them as CAD or survey data from the municipality?
We would gladly use CAD or survey data from the municipality if it's provided, but often it takes longer to do that than to hand digitize. And lots of times they don't even have it. But if we can get it, we do love to use it.
You use construction designs.
Yeah. Well, from time to time, and to add on to that, if we have a new realignment for, let's say, a trunk highway that needs to be added in, but the imagery is not up to date, a lot of times we'll grab that DGN file and we'll export it into the our ArcMap session. And from there, we'll digitize in the line work. But we have to be careful because sometimes you don't know where exactly their center line is, what they're using as their center line. Some of them might not be necessarily down the center of the road. So it's just one of those risk-reward scenarios that we look at. But back to the editing session. So once we finish our edit, we want to always apply updates. So what this does is it recalibrates the events on the route to reflect that the edit that was just done. So even though for this route there are no events downstream, we're still going to apply updates because it's our practice, and you can't get far without doing that. Okay, so now we just completed an extend, and we can see that from the table it now has my user ID in there as well as an edit date, and there's also a new from date. So this is where if we went back in time and looked, if we set a date filter, if we were to set a date filter, if we went before this today's date, we would see that edit wasn't done. But okay, so now that we have 125th Street North completed, we're going to go on to Fondant Trail, and so it's a similar edit to 125th Street, but the only difference is that it's an extend at the beginning of the route instead of the end of the route. And so we'll notice a few differences in the table. So once again, we select the extend tool, and I'll double click in here, and I'm going to select the route. I'm going to do the increasing side first. And okay, so notice how the from measure is negative, but the to measure is 0. That's because of when you draw in the center line, the tool holds on to whatever point that the center line contacts the route. So it contacts the route at 0, so it's holding on to the 0 for the to measure, and it's bumping and it's recalibrating the route, holding on to that measure. So in our system, we can't have any zero measures. We can't have any non-zero measures. So we want to change the front. Negative measures. Oh yeah, sorry. We don't want any negative measures, so we're going to change this to 0 to have the route start there. And for that, we're going to recalibrate the to measure, and so we have it calibrated. So this is where recalibrate route downstream is very important. So if I were to unselect this and go ahead with the edit, we would create what is called a non-monotonic route. And so basically what that is that there are multiple points on the route that have the same measure value, which it's a big no-no, we just don't do. So that's why I'm going to select recalibrate downstream and hit OK. You might notice that I didn't get prompted to lock the route. That's because of earlier in the day I worked on the route, so I already have the lock for it. So don't worry about that necessarily. But so after the edit, if I go and check the measures, I'd see that at the original begin point, we have the new mileage for the increasing side, but since we haven't worked on the decreasing side yet, it still holds onto the 0. And the max measure is just the length of this point added on to the end of the original route. So we're going to do the decreasing side now. Going to select our dates, select our routes, decreasing side. Once again, we're going to change the start of the route to 0, and we're going to recalibrate the end measure. We're going to make sure recalibrate downstream, route downstream is selected. We're going to press OK. Okay, so in this case, once again, we don't want to forget to apply our updates, which is really important in this scenario because we want those new measurements to be on the new to redistribute on the events. So we're going to hit apply updates. Okay, and so we can check with the identify tool to see if the edit went through, and we have a new route. So for time purposes, I'm not going to do Fox Hill Avenue because it's the same exact edit as Fondant Trail. It's just the extend of the beginning of the route. So I'll now demo a create route. So we're going to select the center line, and we're going to navigate to the create route tool. It opens a form. It's similar to the extend box, but it's a little bit more involved. So today's date is going to be the start date of the route. And so since the route doesn't exist, there's no selection tool. So we actually have to build the route right now. We have to build the route. So we click on the button. So since these are municipal streets, we're going to drop down into the box and we're going to go to a 10 for municipal street. And for the GIS feature ID, since it's inside the city limits and the city maintains the street, we're going to give it the city code, which in this case is for Hugo. So if I type it into the box, it'll populate, or it'll auto search for us, and I can just select. For the route number, we want to use the next available number. So I did this beforehand because of, well, it takes a little time to figure out what the next available number is. And it turns out that 146 is the next number available. 146. Oh, sorry, my bad. 346 is the next number available. For the cardinal direction, we're going to use the dash, which is kind of like a placeholder. And for the traffic direction, we're going to do the increasing side first and hit OK. So we can see that the from and the to measures of the route are populated. That's just the length of the center line that we selected. And so now we have to populate the route signing, the ownership, and the route qualifier. So for the route signing, it's a municipal street, so we're going to select that. For the ownership, it's a city or municipal highway agency, so we're going to select that. For route qualifier, we're going to leave that as the default choice, and we're going to hit OK. We're going to get prompted to, we should get, okay, so we just got prompted to lock the route, and then we're going to say yes, and we just created the route. So once this route is finished being created, we're going to go to we're going to do the exact same thing for the decreasing side. So start date, today's date. We're going to populate it for 10 for municipal. Once again, San Hugo. And the decreasing and the increasing are going to have the same route number. So 346, same placeholder. And we're going to have this time use the decreasing side, or put a D there. And we're going to check the measurements again, make sure the route starts at 0. And we're going to give them the same route signing. So municipal and ownership, city/municipal. We're going to press OK. And once again, prompt it for the lock. And we're going to say yes. And we're going to wait for it to create. So once the route is finished creating, being created, we're going to apply updates. Okay. So apply updates, and so I just demoed both types of extend tool edits and a create route. So for time's sake, I'm not going to create this next route or extend the beginning. So now we actually are going to, this ends our roads and highways portion of the demo, and we're going to transition into RCE because we still have to add on the new events for the roads we just added. So before we navigate to RCE, we first have to stop editing in roads and highways, which will prompt us to save our edits. The reason why I have to stop editing in roads and highways is because of the system does not like when you're in one version and editing in both RCE and roads and highways. So if I try to edit in RCE while having roads and highways open, I would be hit with an error, and we don't want that. So it looks like we saved our edits. So I'm going to launch RCE now. So
Question, Malcolm, why didn't we put in the road name? Will that mess up the labeling later?
Well, what do you mean by road name?
Probably street name.
Oh, so
Street name.
so street name is an event, which we're going to populate in RCE. So for the route name, we're going to add that right now. So okay, so roads and so RCE is launched through Workflow Manager. During this demo, we won't go over Workflow Manager. We just need to know that we can launch RCE through it. So when we launch RCE, it's going to launch in our default browser. For me, that's Chrome. And as of right now, I don't think there's any difference between working in Chrome or working in Internet Explorer. So either one will do. So I'm going to sign in. And boom. So we're in RCE. Now we're going to navigate to the area. There's multiple ways you can do this. We can either, let's say we can grab the route number from either one of these routes that we just created, and we can zoom there. But I like to use the identify tool and click in the area, and on the identify tool box, there's a drop down where I can pick the location that I want or the location type. I like to use degrees, minutes, seconds. And so I can grab this location from inside there, copy it, and transition back to roads and RCE. And so if I'm going to use that location, I have to change from find route to find address. And then I'm just going to paste it right in there, hit enter, and then I'm going to click on the first one. And I'm going to back out a little bit. And so here's the area that we have that we just digitized. So if I go back in roads and highways, this is the area that we picked. So, okay, so now that we're in the right in the area, I just want to show you that the new center lines don't have any events on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the Edit tab, then I'm going to select the basic payment layer and the rectangle tool. The reason why I'm selecting the basic payment is just because it's one of the required events that each route must have. And so if it's not on the route, we know that it's just none of the events are on there. So if I just do a survey of the area and I drop down, we notice that the new line, the new center line doesn't have any events on it. So now we're going to populate in those new events. We're going to do that by going to line events under the edit tool section or edit events section. So when we click on the button, it prompts us, it's similar to roads and highways, we have to build the route. So first we're going to select the route we want, and we'll do 125th Street first. So if I click on here, and I'm going to do the increasing side first, per business practices. We did get prompted to lock the route because of if you lock the route in roads and highways under the same version, that lock carries through for RCE. So I know that I can I can go to the end of the route, but I have no idea what the measurement was for the new center line that we added in. So I'm going to turn on my snapping. So I'm going to first navigate, and I'm going to go to snapping options. So I like to have one of the core 6 events on and snap to the end of that. I don't want to grab the vertex just in case there's multiple vertexes in the same neighborhood. And I also like to have the cartographic links chosen to snap to the end of that. And so I like what I see. And you also can snap to up to 3 different layers, but I like the layers I have snapped on, so I'm going to go with OK. And I'm going to enable snapping. So now if I click on my button to get the measure, notice that I'm grabbing onto the locations. So I'm going to snap on right here. If you weren't sure that you grabbed the right measure, you can always navigate back to roads and highways, and I can go to the identify measures, click on there, and I can click on the spot and see that I have the correct measure. That's why it's nice to have both roads and highways and RCE up at the same time, because you can navigate between the 2 systems. So I'm going to go back to RCE. So once I'm satisfied with my extents that I want to edit, I'm going to first I have to check my attribute set. Right now I have it set for the required events. So an attribute set just is basically a list of events that you want to populate. So a person can use different attribute sets for whatever the situation requires. So for this case, I'm going to do the required events. And we're at today's date, and I'm going to go with next. So in order for us to see what exactly, what attribute or what layer we're looking at, I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to go to show. I'm going to click on show route, layer names, and I'm going to expand that a little bit. So I'm going to go back up and expand that. So we'll notice that for every route, we have an accuracy standard. So the accuracy standard is essentially where we got our data from. So we have the design plan. So if we get our attributes from a construction plan, we'll use a design plan. For imagery, it's for, well, if we get our attributes from an imaging service such as Google Earth or Bing or Street View, anything of the like, we use imagery. Local input is if we get the information from either the county or the city. This could be in the form of maps or going to navigating to their webpage. And 40 feet is just for all non-spatial events. So since facility type is non-spatial, we're going to leave that at 40 feet. So I'm going to go to two-way for the attribute, and since there's both an I and there's both an increasing and decreasing side. And so for public status, I'm going to leave that the same as public functional road. We happen to be on traffic access control. So we have 3 different options for traffic access control. Full access control is, say you're on an it's like for an interstate. So anything you have to, that restricts your access to the road. So in the form of like a ramp. So an example of that might be like, might be I-35. So partial access is where there's parts of the route that you can get to by ramp, and there's other part where there's intersections at grade. So an example of that might be Minnesota 36 in the Maplewood area. And for no access control, that's like if you can get to the route basically from your driveway. So we're going to go with no access control. And now we're going to go to the street name. So I got the street name from the local input. And so the street name is 125th. The E911 is going to be unknown. We don't populate these addresses, so I'm going to skip right over those. We didn't have a prefix, but we did have a suffix, and that was N. And the street type was, it's a street, so I'm going to just hit S, and then I'm going to navigate to street and select that. Now we're on through lanes and basic pavement. So for municipal streets, it's rare that you actually get data from the cities about like how the road was built. So we have to rely a lot on Google Earth for these attributes. So if I go to Google Earth and we look at the area, we can see that we have bituminous pavement on the road, and that there's only one through lane on the road. So for the basic pavement and the through lanes, we're going to choose imagery as our source. We're going to leave through lanes as 1 and imagery as well. And we're going to go to, for our pavement, we're going to do bituminous. And so now that we like our results, we're going to hit save. And so we can check to see if those events were actually populated by going to the rectangle or selection tool or area. And if I look in the table, I see that I have a new route ID and my editing credentials are on the route, and it has an edit date, which lets us know that we have that the edit went through.
Good question. So wasn't that particular center line extended originally in your ArcMap Road and Highway session?
Mm-hmm.
So wouldn't the original attributes on that route go with the extended thing?
No. So since it's a new center line, those events would just like they wouldn't go onto the news. They wouldn't extend over the new center line because of that's not the way our event behavior works. So it's the same as I guess what you might say is that the events don't migrate to the new center.
Isn't that kind of determined by whether you're staying put or whatnot?
Yep.
That's something Esri is working on right now for the extending the events.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
It
it's
seems like you'd like to have them. You already got them there.
it seems like a no-brainer.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's actually something they haven't done yet. Huh?
Okay. Okay. So we're going to work on the decreasing side now, and we're going to have the same. It's going to be a similar. Everything's going to be similar to the decreasing side. Increasing side. So we're going to select everything we want to snap to. We're going to hit next, and we notice that all our attributes that we populate for the increasing side stayed, and that's because of I had go to next measure upon save selected. So it just saved all of those changes. So for the decreasing side, the only difference we're going to make is to the facility type. We're going to change that to non-inventory direction so that the facility type doesn't get counted twice. And we're going to hit save. Okay, so then once again, we can check our events to make sure they're added. So see that both sides have the change on there. And this ends the demo of RCE. We'll now go back to the presentation for additional resources and questions.
So we do have a question. When you enter the access, when you enter the access control type, are you guys using right-of-way documents to determine?
Traffic density control, are we using that? Answer to that question is no. Okay, so here are just some additional resources. We have the TA webpage that you can navigate to if you are interested in what we just discussed about. Also, a note on STW. Unmeasured LRS data is available in the STW. If you don't have access to the STW, please contact Prita Mori. And the goal is to have the data published in the MnGeo Commons eventually. But due to some technical issues, that hasn't happened. But once that's resolved, the data will be published. And if you're viewing our data and you notice that changes that need to be made, please submit a request through Racer. That's just simple as using typing in Racer and
Only on Internet Explorer.
only on Internet Explorer. Only on Internet Explorer. It's as simple as typing in Racer and /
Yeah.
and into your browser. And well, that's our time. So thank you for your time. This is the end of the webinar. If there are any questions, send them our way.
Last question, Malcolm. The question is only a non-measured version of LRS going to be on the Commons?
Yes, measured will be available upon request.
I got a question. So if you make an edit with RCE, with roads and highways and ArcMap, where you're modifying a given alignment, and there's business events along that alignment, how's that communicated to the businesses that you've made a change on that alignment?
Well, I think most of those deeming businesses as in like within the
TOT.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, some of those events, I know you guys all manage, but other ones might be by another business area.
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is that most will set up quality control checks that can, let's say you can run a check that checks to see if there's any gaps between and your event layer. So I guess that's the only way that I can think of that would check consistently catch those without someone physically saying like, oh, I made this change. So I guess to set up quality control checks.
Yeah, I guess I was more looking along terms of just, you're not editing their events, but you made a change in the center line. So how do they know that they need to make a change in their event data based on some change you made?
Yeah, that's I don't know, Tim, what would you say for that?
There's different processes depending on what you're doing. So TFA, they're maintaining their events outside the LRS.
Okay.
And that's part of their full-time job, is finding out where the network changes, and keeping their events up to date. Another good one to contact would be Jesse Pearson for all the integrations and see what processes they have come up with. question.
Not a question. All right. Any last questions? Any questions on the phone? Any last Skype questions? All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. We went a little over our time today, but we appreciate those of you that stuck around with us.